Chapter 1. The video started with her husband raising a glass to his mistress. Elise Mercer watched it alone in the dark kitchen at 1:17 in the morning, with rain sliding down the windows and a stack of unpaid company invoices spread across the marble island in front of her. The screen shook a little because the person filming was laughing too hard to hold the phone steady. Then the image sharpened, and Grant Mercer appeared beneath the gold chandeliers of a private dining room, his tuxedo jacket open, his dark hair pushed back, one arm wrapped around a blonde woman in a silver dress. Her name was Bianca Rhodes. She was not a client. She was not a public relations consultant. No matter what Grant had written in the company records, she was the woman who had been wearing Elise's missing emerald earrings in photographs for 2 months. Grant tapped his champagne flute with a knife. The sound rang through the phone speaker like a tiny bell announcing a funeral. "To survival," he said, smiling at the people around the table. "To vision. To the woman who actually stands beside me when the room matters." Bianca pressed her manicured fingers against his chest and laughed softly, the kind of laugh designed to be heard by everyone and owned by no one. Someone at the table called, "What about Elise?" Grant lifted his brows as if the name amused him. "My wife," he said. "Elise is probably at home with her spreadsheets. Poor thing. 37 years old, no glamour, no instincts, no real life. Just a pathetic failure who got lucky enough to marry a man with ambition." The room exploded. His mother, Vivienne Mercer, laughed first. His sister, Camille, leaned over the table and covered her mouth with a napkin, as if the joke had arrived too deliciously to contain. Bianca tilted her head back until the diamonds at her throat flashed in the light. A few executives laughed more carefully, glancing from face to face to make sure they had permission. Elise did not blink. The first strange thing was that she did not cry. She had expected tears. For 7 years, tears had been her private tax for staying in this marriage. She paid them silently in bathrooms, parked cars, airport lounges, and hotel rooms where Grant slept with his back to her after asking for another emergency transfer. Tonight, the tears did not come. Something colder arrived instead. It moved through her slowly, beginning in the center of her chest, then spreading into her hands until her fingers felt steady enough to sign a contract. The video had come from a number she recognized, but had not heard from in months. Nora Mercer, Grant's 22-year-old cousin, had sent it with one line. "You were never supposed to see this, but you deserve the truth." Elise replayed the clip. This time, she watched the background. The dinner was at Aurelia House, one of the most expensive private restaurants in Boston. It was also one of the 12 properties owned by Halden Hospitality, a company controlled through a private family office Elise had inherited from her grandmother. Grant did not know that. Grant believed Aurelia House had chosen his company for a partnership dinner because his name had weight. Elise knew the reservation had been approved through an executive account she owned. On the table sat custom menus embossed with the words Mercer Dynamics Strategic Launch. Grant's company logo gleamed in gold. Beside his plate was a gift box from Verity Jewelers. Bianca wore one emerald earring and one diamond cuff Elise had last seen locked in her dressing room. Elise paused on Grant's face. He looked pleased. Not drunk, not careless, not trapped in a moment that had gone too far. Pleased. His smile had the polished confidence of a man who had said cruel things before and never paid interest on them. Her phone lit again. A second video. This one began with Camille's voice behind the camera. "Bianca, tell us. How does it feel to replace the family accountant?" Bianca leaned toward the lens. Her lipstick was the exact shade Elise had once worn to a charity gala, before Grant told her red made her look as if she were trying too hard. "I would never call Elise an accountant," Bianca said. "Accountants have clients. She has chores. She is useful, though. Every man needs someone invisible to keep the lights on." Grant kissed Bianca's temple. "She will not leave," he said. "Women like Elise do not leave. They wait to be chosen." The laughter came again. Elise set the phone face down on the counter. In the quiet that followed, she became aware of the house around her. The hand-painted Italian tile in the kitchen. The walnut floors. the library beyond the hall, the framed photograph of Grant shaking hands with the governor above the console table. Every piece of it had been arranged to tell a story about Grant Mercer, self-made founder, relentless husband, beloved son. The story was beautiful. It was also paid for by Elise. She walked into the study and switched on the banker lamp. Soft green light pooled over the desk where Grant never sat because paperwork bored him, unless a camera was nearby. Elise opened the lower drawer, removed a black leather folder, and laid it flat. Inside were the documents Grant had never read because he believed domestic calm was a natural resource: the deed to the house, the controlling note on Mercer Dynamics, the bridge financing agreements, the private investor protections, the transfer records for his mother's townhouse, his sister's failed boutique, his nephew's school fees, his company's payroll, his lawyers, his travel, his public image, and apparently Bianca Rhodes. Elise opened her laptop and signed into the Sterling Vale family office. At the top of the screen, her own name appeared in discreet gray letters. Elise Sterling Mercer. Grant had spent 7 years telling people she was a timid financial consultant who had married above herself. He did not know that before she became Elise Mercer, she had been Elise Sterling, sole heir to a shipping, logistics, and hotel fortune, old enough to have enemies with grandchildren. She had hidden the name because she wanted a marriage untouched by inheritance. Grant had taken the silence as proof she had nothing. At 2:04 in the morning, Elise began to audit him. Not because she was angry, though she was. Not because she wanted revenge, though a small, clean part of her wanted to watch the smile fall from Bianca's face. She began because numbers were the one place no one could charm, shout, flirt, or cry their way out of the truth. By 3:10, she found the first consulting contract. Bianca Rhodes, Strategic Communications Advisor, $28,000 a month. By 3:42, she found the travel expenses: Paris, Miami, Aspen, Napa. All coded as partnership development. By 4:15, she found the jewelry invoices. At dawn, while Grant's side of the bed remained empty, Elise created 4 folders: marriage, company, family, public record. Then she drafted 1 email to her attorney, 1 to the chief compliance officer of the family office, and 1 to the chairwoman of Mercer Dynamics, a retired federal judge named Lenora Pike, who had once told Elise, quietly after a board dinner, that silence was useful only when it was chosen. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Grant came home. He smelled of tobacco, champagne, and Bianca's perfume. Elise was making coffee. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her dressed in a cream blouse, gray trousers, and pearl earrings, not in the soft robe he expected from a woman who waited. "Elise," he said too brightly. "You are up early." She poured 1 cup. "Yes." He crossed the kitchen and kissed her cheek. His lips were cold. She noticed a pale shimmer of lipstick near his collar and the faint scratch of another woman's ring on his jaw. "Long night," he said. "So I heard." His hand paused on the coffee cup. "What does that mean?" Elise looked at him. For 7 years, she had practiced making her face peaceful so Grant could keep moving through life without tripping over her pain. This morning, she gave him that same peace, but removed the surrender from it. "It means you should sleep," she said. "You have a launch to prepare for." His eyes narrowed. Before he could speak, his phone buzzed. Bianca's name filled the screen. He flipped it over, but not fast enough. Elise saw it. Grant saw her see it. For 1 second, the kitchen held the real shape of the marriage. Then Grant smiled, already choosing denial. "Investor call," he said. Elise took her coffee and walked past him. He believed his wife was quiet because she was weak. That mistake had made him careless. By noon, Elise sat in a private conference room on the 34th floor of Sterling Vale headquarters, facing 3 people who had known her longer than Grant had known her favorite tea. Mara Whitcomb, her divorce attorney, wore a charcoal suit and the expression of a woman who had sharpened the truth until it could cut glass. Andrew Sable, chief compliance officer for the family office, had brought 2 binders and no visible sympathy. Judge Lenora Pike, joined by secure video from New York. Silver hair pinned neatly, eyes severe behind black frames. Elise played the videos once. No one interrupted. When Grant's voice said pathetic failure, Mara's mouth tightened. When Bianca called Elise invisible, Andrew wrote a note. When Grant said women like Elise do not leave, Judge Pike leaned closer to the camera and said, he should have checked the loan covenants before making predictions. Elise almost smiled. The almost was enough. Mara opened the first binder. The marriage is straightforward. Prenuptial agreement protects premarital assets. He receives nothing from Sterling Vale. Marital assets are limited, and even those are complicated by his misuse of funds. We file when you give the word. Prepare it, Elise said. Do not serve yet. Andrew tapped the second binder. Company side is stronger. Mercer Dynamics owes the Sterling Vale Growth Fund $19.8 million across 3 notes. There are morality and disclosure provisions. There are conflict provisions. There is a misuse clause tied to executive discretionary spending. If these Bianca contracts were approved without board knowledge, we can freeze the next tranche, demand records, and initiate default review. Do it legally, Elise said. Andrew looked mildly offended. I assumed that was implied. Judge Pike folded her hands. The board meeting is scheduled for Thursday. The public product launch is Friday night. Grant plans to announce the Athena contract there. If we move before Thursday, he may paint this as a domestic dispute. If we wait until the launch, he exposes himself in front of partners, press, and directors. Mara looked at Elise. Public exposure is powerful, but it must be disciplined. No revenge theater. Elise thought of Bianca's laugh, Grant's hand on her waist, Vivian's delighted expression as her daughter-in-law became the family joke. I am done with theater, Elise said. I want records. Good, Mara replied. Records are more dangerous. They worked for 2 hours. The plan took shape in clean steps. First, freeze all discretionary funding from Sterling Vale until Mercer Dynamics provided audited documentation for executive expenses. Second, preserve evidence from Aurelia House, including reservation records, security footage, invoices, menus, and staff notes. Third, notify the board chair privately, with documentation, so the board could not later claim ignorance. Fourth, prepare divorce filings, asset separation, and a temporary order protecting Elise's personal property. Fifth, allow Grant one final public stage, because men like Grant rarely resisted a microphone. When the meeting ended, Mara remained behind. Elise, she said, softer now, what do you want from him personally? The question landed harder than the legal strategy. Elise looked down at her wedding ring. It was a simple platinum band, not because Grant liked simplicity, but because he had told her large stones made women look desperate. Her engagement ring sat in a drawer at home. She had stopped wearing it after he complained that clients might assume she came from money. I wanted him to be the man he pretended to be when no one important was watching, she said. Mara waited. Elise took off the ring and placed it on the conference table. Now I want him to meet the woman he created when he mistook restraint for permission. Mara slid a small envelope toward her. Then keep this. We will use it when the papers are served. Inside was a printed still from the video. Grant's champagne glass raised. Bianca smiling against him, the word failure hanging invisibly between them. Elise put it in her bag. When she returned home that evening, Grant was in the living room on a call, pacing in front of the fireplace. He wore a navy sweater and that charming founder voice he used when he needed money. I understand timing, he said into the phone. But the tranche has never been late. Our investor is solid. Elise set her bag on the table. Grant turned. I will call you back. He ended the call and stared at her. Did you do something? With what? With the investor account. Elise removed her coat slowly. Why would I have access to your investor account? His eyes searched her face. That was when she saw the first flicker of fear. It came and went quickly, buried beneath irritation. I am asking because finance says the funds are under review, he snapped. It is a bad week for mysterious delays. A bad week for mysteries, Elise said. Interesting, Grant exhaled. Please do not start with riddles. The launch is Friday. This company has hundreds of people depending on it. I know. You know? Yes. I have always known. He studied her again. What is wrong with you? For 7 years, that question had worked. It shifted the ground beneath her feet. If she was hurt, she was sensitive. If she was tired, she was dramatic. If she questioned money, she was controlling. If she asked where he had been, she was insecure. Tonight, the ground did not move. Nothing is wrong with me, Elise said. Grant's face hardened. Then fix whatever needs fixing. I cannot babysit your moods and run a company. Elise picked up her bag and walked toward the stairs. Behind her, he said, You should be grateful, Elise. Most men in my position would not have been this patient. She stopped. There it was. The family word. The word Vivienne used when she wanted obedience dressed as manners. The word Camille used before asking Elise to cover another school invoice. The word Grant used whenever he mistook endurance for debt. Elise turned back. Patient with what? Grant laughed without warmth. With your limits. She looked at him for a long moment, memorizing the angle of his jaw, the impatience in his eyes, the man who still believed he was the prize in a house he did not own. Then she said, Friday will be interesting. Grant's expression shifted. What is Friday? Elise walked upstairs without answering. Finished reading the preliminary expense audit. Elise let it ring. Then she let it ring again. On the third call, she answered. Good morning, Vivienne. Do not good morning me, Vivienne said. Her voice had the brittle elegance of expensive china hitting stone. What have you done to my son? Elise looked at the spreadsheet on her screen. Bianca's consulting invoices appeared in one column, Grant's approvals in another, each transaction tied to a date when payroll had been delayed or vendor terms had been extended. That depends on what he told you. He told me you are being cold. Then he told you less than usual. Vivienne inhaled sharply. I have tried with you, Elise. I truly have. I welcomed you into this family when others wondered what Grant saw in you. Elise leaned back in her chair. The old Elise would have apologized for the tension in Vivienne's voice. She would have rushed to soothe, explain, prove she was not difficult. She would have offered brunch, flowers, another check. The new Elise simply listened. Vivienne continued. You are not glamorous. You are not socially gifted. You have never understood what a man like Grant needs in public. But I told everyone you were steady. I defended you. By laughing in the video, silence. It lasted 2 full breaths. Then Vivienne said, very softly, What video? Elise almost admired the instinct. Deny first. Grieve later. The dinner at Aurelia House. Another silence. Vivienne recovered with impressive speed. If you saw something taken out of context, you should have come to me instead of punishing everyone. Everyone? The launch funding is delayed. Camille says her boutique settlement payment did not clear. The caterer for my anniversary luncheon called about a deposit. You are creating chaos because your feelings were hurt. There it was. Hurt feelings as a small phrase to contain a large betrayal. Elise scrolled to another tab. Payments to Camille Mercer. 6 years. Tuition for Camille's daughters. Emergency rent. Legal debt. Inventory loans. Interior design invoices coded as family support. Vivienne, Elise said. Do you know who paid Camille's boutique settlement? Grant arranged it. No. Vivienne made a small, impatient sound. This is not the time for one of your bookkeeping lectures. Do you know who paid your townhouse property tax last December? Grant handles family matters. No. Stop saying no. Then stop lying to yourself. Vivienne gasped as if Elise had slapped her. For years, Vivienne had been the queen of rooms she did not finance. She hosted dinners, approved seating charts, corrected Elise's clothes, and told stories about how the Mercer family rose through grit after Grant's father died. Elise had never interrupted. She had allowed Vivienne to believe in the myth because grief had made the woman sharp, and Elise had mistaken sharpness for pain that needed care. Now she understood. Some people did not weaponize pain because they were broken. They weaponized it because it worked. Vivienne's voice dropped. You listen to me. Whatever you think you know, you will not embarrass this family on Friday. Why would I embarrass it? Elise asked. Because women like you become dangerous when they realize they are replaceable. Elise closed the laptop. She stood and walked to the window. The city below looked washed clean by rain, glass towers catching a pale winter sun. Vivienne, she said, I was never replaceable, I was concealed. Then she ended the call. Within minutes, Camille began texting. Mom is shaking. What is wrong with you? If you are mad at Grant, take it up with Grant. My girl's school payment is due. Do not drag children into your drama. Elise opened the payment history and looked at the tuition total, $486,000 over 6 years. Camille had thanked Grant every semester. She had once told Elise, at Thanksgiving, that women without children could never understand real sacrifice. Elise typed one sentence. Future tuition support is now your responsibility. Camille replied instantly. Are you insane? Elise did not answer. The family group chat erupted next. Vivienne asked everyone to pray for Grant under attack. Camille said Elise had become unstable. An uncle Elise barely knew wrote that success changed women. Grant remained silent, which told Elise he was afraid to commit to a written version of his lie. Then Nora texted privately. They are saying you are blackmailing him. Elise replied, Let them speak. Save everything. Nora sent a thumbs up, then quickly added words. I will. I am sorry. Elise stared at the apology. Nora had been in the room, but she had not laughed. In the video, she was near the corner, face pale, holding her phone low beneath the table. At 22, she still looked like a girl who had learned the rules of the Mercer family early. Do not challenge Vivienne. Do not outshine Grant. Do not defend anyone who has been selected as the evening's entertainment. Elise did not absolve her, but she understood the architecture of fear. That afternoon, Andrew called. We have the Aurelia House file, he said. It is worse than expected. How much worse? The dinner was billed to Mercer Dynamics as a partner development event. The guest list includes no actual representatives from the Athena contract. It was family, Bianca, 2 friendly executives, and a lifestyle journalist. Elise looked up. A journalist? Yes. Grant seems to have arranged a soft profile about his rise. There are notes suggesting Bianca would be described as his closest advisor. Elise felt the cold return. He planned to erase me publicly. Andrew was silent for a moment. Yes, he said. That appears to be the direction. Elise thanked him and hung up. For several minutes she sat without moving. The betrayal itself had been intimate, ugly, humiliating, common in its cruelty. But this new piece was different. Grant had not merely taken a mistress. He had begun rewriting the public story while Elise was still financing the ink. He wanted Bianca beside him, at the launch, in the photos, in the article, in the future investors' minds. He wanted Elise at home with the invoices. The phone rang. Grant. This time, she answered. What did you do with the Athena journalist? She asked. His silence was answer enough. Then he said, You have been spying on me. No. Your records have been telling on you. Elise, you are crossing lines you do not understand. I understand lines perfectly. I have been paying for you to cross them. His voice hardened. If you embarrass me Friday, you will regret it. She looked at the folders on her desk, each one a different door closing. Grant, she said, by Friday 4. The day before the launch, Grant came home early. That alone told Elise the fear had become serious. He found her in the library, reading a printed copy of the Mercury magazine profile draft. The headline had been simple, almost obscene in its confidence. Grant Mercer and the woman behind his rise. The woman was Bianca. In the article, she was called his creative anchor, his rare truth teller, the person who understood the emotional architecture of ambition. Elise was mentioned once, near the end, as his private wife who preferred a quieter role. A quieter role. She had stared at that phrase for 10 minutes before laughing once, without humor. Grant entered the room and shut the door. He had dressed carefully. White shirt, sleeves rolled, no tie, watch visible. The version of himself he used for apologies that were really negotiations. "Elise," he said, "we need to talk like adults." She placed the article on the table. "I would welcome that." He saw the pages. His expression tightened. "Where did you get that?" "From the journalist you invited to a fake business dinner paid for by company funds." He rubbed a hand over his mouth. "It was a draft. It was a replacement." He looked away. For the first time, Grant seemed tired. Not guilty. Tired. There was a difference. Guilt looked outward toward the person harmed. Exhaustion looked inward at the cost of being discovered. "Elise, Bianca helped me with image strategy. That is all. She wore my earrings. I bought her earrings." "With company money?" He flinched. She lifted the jewelry invoice from the stack. "With company money." Grant's face colored. "You do not know what it is like to build something. You inherited rooms. I had to fight for mine." Elise let the sentence settle. There it was, the old wound he loved to show. Grant had grown up comfortable, then less comfortable after his father's death. He had made that decline into a heroic origin story. Elise had never corrected the exaggerations because she knew grief could distort memory. But Grant had not fought for rooms. He had entered them on money he mocked. "You are right," she said. "I inherited rooms. Then I learned how to keep them standing. You were handed bridges and called yourself a builder because you crossed them loudly." His eyes flashed. "Do not speak to me like that." "Why?" "Does truth sound rude when it is not flattering you?" He stepped closer. "I made you visible." Elise slowly stood. The room seemed to shift with her. Grant was taller, broader, used to filling space. But for once, his body did not make hers smaller. "No," she said. "You hid me because visibility would have required honesty." He stared at her. "Who are you talking to?" "My husband." "You sound like one of those lawyers." "I hired excellent ones." The words landed. Grant's face went still. "What does that mean?" "It means you should hire your own." For the first time, panic broke through the polish. "Elise, wait." He reached for her hand. She moved before he touched her. His fingers closed around air. That small failure angered him more than it should have. "You are making this ugly," he said. "You filmed ugly. I am filing it." He swallowed. "I was showing off. It was cruel. Fine. I admit it. I should not have said what I said." The apology arrived like a late invoice. Accurate, insufficient, and addressed to the wrong department. "What about Bianca?" Elise asked. "She is not important." "She seemed important when you called her your real future." Grant's jaw worked. "She was useful." Elise looked at him then. Really looked. The man who had humiliated her was now humiliating his mistress without realizing it. People were categories to Grant. Useful, impressive, inconvenient, invisible. Love had never been a room in his house. It was a label he placed on whatever served him without demanding a mirror. "Elise," he said, softening again. "Do you remember Vermont?" She did, their second year of marriage. Snow outside a rented cabin. Grant cooking badly, both of them laughing, her head against his shoulder while he promised they would never become one of those couples who performed happiness and stored resentment in separate drawers. Memory tried to open a door. Elise closed it gently. "I remember who I was before I confused history with obligation." He stepped back. "You are not really leaving." The certainty in his voice was astonishing. Even now, standing among evidence, frozen funds, and a wife he did not recognize, he still believed abandonment was something he did to other people. Elise picked up the article draft and handed it to him. "Read the headline." He looked down. "Grant Mercer and the woman behind his rise," she said. Tomorrow after 5 Friday arrived bright and cold. The Mercer Dynamics launch was scheduled at Haldon Hall, a restored banking building with marble columns, bronze doors, and a ballroom designed for men who enjoyed hearing their names echo. Grant had chosen it himself. unaware that Howden Hall belonged to the same hospitality group as Aurelia House. Elise approved the venue invoice that morning, then froze every additional hospitality charge tied to Grant's executive account. She dressed slowly. Not for Grant. Not for Bianca. Not for cameras. For the woman she had been at 29, signing loan documents in secret because her husband had come home pale with shame and said payroll might fail. For the woman at 31, wiring money to Vivienne while Vivienne told friends Elise was sweet but plain. For the woman at 34, sitting alone at a gala table while Grant worked the room with one hand on Bianca's back, and later insisted Elise was imagining things. She wore a black silk dress with clean lines, a cream coat, and her grandmother's emerald ring. Her hair was twisted low. Her makeup was restrained. She looked less like a betrayed wife than a woman arriving to close a transaction. Mara met her outside the venue. Last chance to choose a quieter route, Mara said. Elise looked at the bronze doors. Through the glass, she could see photographers, sponsor walls, men in tuxedos, women in jewel tones, the machinery of reputation already turning. Quiet is how we got here, Elise said. Mara nodded. Then we proceed. Inside, the launch glittered. A screen above the stage displayed the Athena product demo. White flowers lined the room. Champagne moved through the crowd. Reporters took notes near the front. The board occupied a reserved section, their faces carefully neutral because Judge Pike had briefed them that morning. Grant stood near the sponsor wall with Bianca. He saw Elise and went rigid. Bianca followed his gaze. Her smile opened, then faltered. She had expected the wife from the stories, plain, nervous, dull enough to pity and safe enough to mock. Elise watched the calculation pass through Bianca's eyes as she took in the dress, the ring, the posture, the way staff greeted Elise with small respectful nods. Grant recovered first. He crossed the room, smiling for the cameras. Elise, he said, kissing the air beside her cheek. I did not know you were coming. You invited your wife. His smile sharpened. I invited a version of my wife who knows how to behave. Mara's eyes flicked toward him. Elise touched her arm once. Wait. Bianca glided over, silver dress catching light. Around her neck hung a diamond pendant Elise recognized from a missing insurance schedule. Elise, Bianca said. This must be hard. Her voice carried just enough for nearby people to hear. Elise looked at the pendant. Is that how you describe wearing stolen jewelry in public? The nearest photographer lowered his camera. Bianca's face changed. Excuse me? The pendant. It belonged to my mother. Grant's hand closed around Elise's elbow. Enough. Elise looked down at his fingers. He let go. A security director stepped closer. He had received the insurance report at noon. Bianca laughed, too high. Grant gave it to me. Yes, Elise said. That is part of the problem. Grant leaned close. Do not do this here. You did. The words were quiet, but they struck him hard enough to make him blink. Before he could answer, the lights dimmed. The host announced him. Grant had always loved applause. It had the same effect on him that oxygen had on everyone else. Even now, with his wife standing beside his attorney, his mistress clutching stolen diamonds, and his board watching with loaded silence, he stepped onto the stage as if the room still belonged to him. The applause rose. He smiled. Good evening, he said. Tonight is about courage. Elise stood near the front aisle. Mara stood behind her. Andrew waited near the projection booth with the venue's legal director. Judge Pike sat in the front row, hands folded over a black program. Grant continued. Mercer Dynamics began as a belief that innovation is not built by committees. It is built by people willing to be misunderstood. Bianca beamed at him from the side of the stage. Vivienne sat in the front row wearing navy lace and a diamond brooch Elise had paid to repair. Camille whispered into her phone until Judge Pike turned and looked at her. Camille stopped. Grant lifted a hand toward Bianca. I want to thank the person who has understood my vision most clearly. who has stood beside me through the pressure, the late nights, the impossible decisions. A murmur moved through the room. Reporters looked up. Bianca stepped forward, glowing. Then the screen behind Grant went black. The microphone cut out. For 1 second, Grant kept speaking without sound, his mouth moving in the sudden silence. Then a new slide appeared. Sterling Vale Growth Fund. Notice of Material Breach Review. Mercer Dynamics Executive Conduct and Financial Disclosure. The room froze. Grant turned slowly. Judge Pike stood. She did not need a microphone. The room gave her attention the way a court gives silence to a verdict. Mr. Mercer, she said, before this company makes any public representation regarding leadership, partnership, or financial stability, the board must address a material disclosure. Grant's face drained. Lenora, he said, this is not appropriate. No, Judge Pike said. What is not appropriate is using company funds to compensate a romantic partner under an undisclosed consulting agreement while the company relies on emergency investor financing. The first gasp came from the press row. Bianca stepped back. Grant gripped the sides of the podium. This is a private board matter. It became public when you invited press to a launch built on incomplete representations. Vivienne rose. This is outrageous. Judge Pike turned her gaze on her. Vivienne sat down. Mara walked to the stage and handed Grant a folder. This is formal notice from Sterling Vale Growth Fund, she said. Funding is frozen pending audit. Executive expense accounts are preserved. Device and document deletion after this notice may be treated as spoliation. Grant did not take the folder. Mara placed it on the podium. His eyes found Elise. Every person in the room followed his gaze. The attention moved toward her like a tide. Elise walked forward. There were whispers now. Wife. Investor. What is happening? Is that Elise? I thought she was just. That little word floated around her like smoke. She climbed the stage steps. Grant said under his breath, Duder 6. Elise had imagined many versions of this moment. In some, she shouted. In some, she cried. In one, she played the entire video and let the room drown in Grant's laughter. But standing beneath the lights, looking at the man who had spent years making her smaller so he could feel larger, she felt no need to be dramatic. The facts were dramatic enough. My name is Elise Sterling Mercer, she said. The surname Sterling moved through the room faster than any scream could have. Reporters recognized it first. Then bankers. Then the board members who had suspected but never been told. Sterling meant shipping corridors, hotel groups, logistics parks, investment funds, old money, quiet money. Money that did not need to borrow rooms because it owned buildings. Grant stared at her as if the stage had opened under his feet. For 7 years, Elise continued. Many people in this room have known me as Grant Mercer's wife. Some knew me as quiet. Some as private. Some, apparently, as pathetic. A ripple went through the crowd. Bianca's face went gray. Elise did not look at her yet. For 4 years, Sterling Vale Growth Fund has provided emergency financing to Mercer Dynamics. Payroll support, bridge notes, vendor stabilization, legal coverage, and restructuring capital. Those funds were not a gift to Grant Mercer. They were obligations tied to strict disclosure requirements. Grant leaned toward the microphone. Elise, this is personal. She turned to him. No. Kissing your mistress at a company-funded dinner while calling your wife a failure was personal. This is financial. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Judge Pike's mouth did not move, but approval flickered in her eyes. Elise lifted a folder. These records show payments to Miss Bianca Rhodes under a consulting contract that was not properly disclosed to the board. They show travel expenses categorized as partnership development, where no partners were present. They show jewelry purchases coded through executive discretionary accounts. They show private family expenses repeatedly pushed toward company cash flow, while employees were told to be patient. A man in the second row, the operations director, stood halfway, then sat as if his knees had forgotten their purpose. Grant's voice cracked. You are destroying the company. Elise looked at him. No, Grant. I am separating the company from the man who used it as a wallet. Bianca finally spoke. Her voice was thin. He told me he had board approval. Elise turned to her. For the affair or the salary? A sound came from the room, sharp and collective. Bianca's eyes filled with tears. Beautiful tears. Calculated too late. He said you two were separated, she whispered. Grant closed his eyes. Elise smiled without warmth. Did the separation include my jewelry? Bianca lifted a hand to the pendant as if remembering it existed. Security moved closer. Vivienne stood again, shaking with rage. Enough. Elise, you ungrateful little nobody. The room went silent. Elise looked down at the woman who had spent years teaching everyone where to place her. Then she nodded to Andrew. The screen changed. The first video appeared. Grant. Champagne raised. Bianca against him. Vivienne laughing. Camille filming. Executives clapping. My wife? Video, Grant said. Elise is probably at home with her spreadsheets. Poor thing. 37 years old, no glamour, no instincts, no real life. Just a pathetic failure who got lucky enough to marry a man with ambition. Laughter filled the ballroom. Then the video stopped. The silence after it was enormous. It had weight, texture, heat. Elise let it remain for 3 seconds. Then she spoke. That dinner was held at Aurelia House and billed as a business development event. No client attended. No partner attended. The woman beside my husband was being paid from company funds. The jewelry she wore was mine. The laughter you heard came from people who believed the person funding their comfort would never hear them. Vivienne sat as if someone had cut strings in her back. Camille began to cry, but no one moved toward her. Grant looked at Elise with naked hatred now. It was the most honest expression he had given her in years. You planned this, he said. Yes. For how long? Since you called me a failure in a room paid for by my money. He laughed once, broken and ugly. Your money. There it is. You finally admit what you really care about. Elise stepped closer. No. What I care about is consent. I can choose to invest. I can choose to help. I can choose to stand beside someone. But I do not consent to being robbed, mocked, erased, and then told I should be grateful for the privilege. Her voice stayed level. That made every word harder to dismiss. She turned to the audience. Mercer Dynamics will continue under board supervision. Employee wages will be protected. Vendor obligations will be reviewed. Will pause until the audit is complete. The company is not dying tonight. Then she looked at Grant. Only the lie is. The move was not Grant. It was Victor Hale, the chief financial officer, who stood near the side wall with his face pale and his hands trembling around his phone. Judge Pike, he said, voice rough. I have records. Grant turned sharply. Victor. Victor flinched, then straightened. For 3 years, Victor had been the quiet man at board meetings, always half a step behind Grant, always presenting numbers with the strained precision of someone tidying up after a storm. Elise had wondered whether he was complicit or cornered. The difference mattered. Victor looked at Elise, then at the board. I raised concerns about discretionary expenses twice, he said. Mr. Mercer told me the investor family had approved them informally. I have emails. Grant slammed his hand on the podium. You coward. Victor's face reddened, but he did not sit. No, he said. I am late. That is different. The sentence moved something in Elise. Late was not innocent, but late could still matter if it arrived before the final door closed. Judge Pike signaled to company counsel. Preserve his devices. 2 board members stood. The room shifted from scandal to procedure. That was how power protected itself when it finally decided which side was safer. Reporters were already typing. Bianca tried to leave. Security stopped her at the ballroom doors. Ma'am, the director said quietly, we need to document the jewelry before you go. Bianca looked toward Grant. For the first time that night, he did not look back. That hurt her more than Elise's accusation. Elise saw it land. Bianca had believed she was being chosen. Perhaps she had even believed Elise was the obstacle between herself and a glittering future. Now she understood she had been another expense line, another prop Grant would discard once she cost too much. Elise did not pity her. Pity required distance. Tonight, Bianca was still wearing Elise's mother's pendants. Vivienne pushed through the front row and climbed the stage steps, ignoring Mara's warning hand. Her face was white beneath her powder. The diamond brooch trembled on her chest. "You vile woman," she whispered at Elise, too low for the microphones but loud enough for Grant to hear. "After everything this family gave you." Elise looked at her. "What did you give me, Vivienne?" Vivienne's eyes flashed. "A name. I had one. A place. I owned the house. Purpose." Elise laughed softly then, not because it was funny, but because some lies revealed their own absurdity when repeated in daylight. "No," she said. "You gave me invoices and called them family." Vivienne raised her hand. The room saw it. So did the cameras. She stopped herself 1 inch from Elise's face. That inch saved her from a security report. It did not save her dignity. Mara stepped between them. "Mrs. Mercer, leave the stage." Vivienne looked around and realized, too late, that she was no longer performing for a family table where she controlled the laughter. She was standing in front of reporters, investors, directors, and employees who had just watched her laugh at the woman keeping her son's company alive. She descended the steps without another word. Grant remained at the podium. His hands were gripping it so tightly his knuckles looked bloodless. "Elise," he said into the microphone, suddenly soft. "We are husband and wife. We can talk about this privately." The room seemed to hold its breath. There was the man she had married. Or rather, the man he had performed when performance served him. His voice warmed at the edges. His eyes shone. He looked wounded, noble, misunderstood. Elise remembered Vermont. His burnt pancakes. Snow on the windows. His promise that she would never have to shrink beside him. For a second, grief came so strongly she nearly lost the thread of her breath. Then the screen behind him still held the frozen notice of breach. The pendant still rested against Bianca's throat near the door. Vivienne still glared from the front row. Grant's hand still hovered near the microphone, trying to turn marriage into a shield after using it as camouflage. Elise said, "You had 7 years of private." His face changed. "Tomorrow morning," she continued, "you will be served with divorce papers. Tonight, you are suspended from executive authority pending investigation. You are to preserve all records, devices, correspondence, and accounts related to Mercer Dynamics, Bianca Rose." He swallowed. "You cannot do this." "I already did." "Elise, please." The word please struck the room like a dropped glass. He had not used it when asking for transfers. Not when telling her to host his mother. Not when demanding she smooth over Camille's debts. Not when asking her to smile beside him for photographs after disappearing all night with Bianca. Please arrived only after power left him. Elise handed the microphone back to Mara. She stepped off the stage. As she walked down the aisle, people moved aside. Not dramatically. Not like a queen parting crowds. More like witnesses making space for someone who had finally become impossible to misread. Nora waited near the exit. Her eyes were wet. "Elise," she whispered, "I am sorry." Elise stopped. Behind her, the room buzzed with consequence. Lawyers, directors, reporters, Grant's broken voice, Bianca arguing with security, Vivienne calling someone in a frantic whisper. Elise looked at Nora. "Do not spend your life apologizing for arriving late," she said. "Arrive earlier next time." Nora nodded, crying harder. Elise touched her shoulder once, and the public collapse was fast. The private collapse was quieter and more revealing. By Saturday morning, 3 articles had gone live. The first called it a corporate governance crisis. The second called it a marital scandal. The third, written by the same journalist Grant had invited to erase Elise, carried a headline that made Mara laugh into her coffee. The hidden Sterling Harris behind Mercer Dynamics freezes funding after public humiliation. Elise did not read beyond the first paragraph. She did not need journalists to tell her what had happened. She needed lawyers to finish it cleanly. Grant was served at 9 a.m. in the temporary apartment he had rented after Elise changed the locks on the private wing of the house. The house itself was never contested. It had been purchased by Elise before the marriage through a trust. Grant had never bothered to understand. The cars were harder, but Mara enjoyed messy. By noon, Grant began calling. Elise had expected rage. Instead, the first voicemail was tender. Elise, I know you are hurt. I know I failed you. But do not let attorneys poison what we had. The second was defensive. You do not understand what Bianca was. It was pressure. It was image. It was never a real marriage threat. The third was angry. You are enjoying this. Admit it. You always wanted to punish me for being the one people noticed. The fourth came at 2:13 a.m. Elise, please. My mother is not well. Camille is terrified. The board will not take my calls. I need you to tell them this has gone too far. She saved every voicemail in the legal folder and answered none. On Sunday, Vivienne arrived at the house. Elise watched from the upstairs window as Vivienne stepped out of a black car wearing sunglasses large enough to conceal either tears or strategy. Camille followed, wrapped in a camel coat, clutching a folder. They stood at the front door and rang the bell 6 times. Elise did not open it. Instead, she answered through the intercom. This is not a good time. Vivienne lifted her face toward the camera. Do not be childish. Let us in. No. Camille stepped forward. Elise, my daughters are asking why Uncle Grant is on the news. Do you understand what you have done to the children? Elise closed her eyes for a second. Children. The final refuge of adults who had spent years teaching them the wrong lessons. I understand they are old enough to learn that adults should not steal, lie, or laugh at people who help them. Camille's face crumpled. How can you be so cruel? Vivienne snapped. You were nothing when Grant married you. Elise looked at the small screen showing Vivienne's distorted face. Say that again, she said. Vivienne paused. Elise continued. Say it clearly. The intercom records. Vivienne took one step back. Camille gripped her mother's arm. The old family rhythm broke visibly. Vivienne wanted to attack. Camille wanted money. Neither wanted evidence. Elise said, all future communication goes through attorneys. She ended the call. They remained on the porch for 14 minutes, arguing in sharp whispers. Then they left. Later that day, Nora came by with a cardboard box. Elise almost did not answer. But Nora stood alone, no makeup, hair in a loose ponytail, wearing a university sweatshirt, and the expression of someone ready to be turned away. Elise opened the door. Nora held out the box. These are things I found at Aunt Vivian's. Your scarf, 2 books, a pair of earrings, and some letters Grant told her to keep because you were too sentimental. Elise took the box. Why are you doing this? Nora swallowed. Because I watched them make you the family joke for years, and I told myself it was not my place. Then I watched the video after I sent it to you, and I heard myself laughing under my breath at one point. Not because it was funny, because everyone else was laughing and I was scared not to. I hated myself for it. Elise studied her. Nora's hands trembled around the box. I do not expect forgiveness, Nora said. I just wanted to stop being late. Elise stepped aside. Come in for tea. Nora's face shifted with surprise. Tea was not forgiveness. Tea was not trust, but it was an opening, small and conditional, the kind given not because someone deserved ease, but because they had finally chosen truth when lying would have been safer. They sat in the kitchen while rain tapped against the windows, as it had the night the video arrived. Nora told her what she knew. The family had mocked Elise for years. Vivienne called her Grant's useful shadow. Camille joked that Elise was the most boring, rich-adjacent woman alive, never guessing how close the joke came to a truth she could not survive. Grant had begun taking Bianca to family dinners 6 months earlier, first as a consultant, then as something everyone understood and no one named. Did they know? Elise asked. About my money? Nora shook her head. No. They thought Grant had some private investor. Aunt Vivienne said you were lucky because Grant did not need your income. Elise looked into her tea. Lucky. Another word ruined by repetition, Nora continued. Bianca thought you knew and tolerated it because you had nowhere else to go. She said that at dinner once. Grant laughed. Elise absorbed that quietly. The strangest part of betrayal was not always the wound itself. Sometimes it was discovering how much effort people had spent inventing a smaller version of you so they could sleep beside what they had done. Thank you for telling me, Elise said. Nora nodded. What happens now? Elise looked around the kitchen, at the room where she had once waited for Grant, softened her voice for Grant, paid Grant's bills, and mistaken exhaustion for devotion. Now, Chapter 9 discovery turned Grant from a charming man into a careless archive. The emails came first. Grant to Bianca. Do not worry about Elise. She hates conflict. She will sign whatever I put in front of her if I make it sound like payroll. Grant to Victor. Code Bianca under communications. Board does not need detail. Grant to Camille. Elise will cover the school. She always caves when kids are mentioned. Grant to Vivienne. Keep being firm. She responds to guilt better than logic. Elise read them in Mara's office with both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. Every sentence was a door opening on a room she wished did not exist. Mara watched her carefully. Do you need a break? No. Elise. She looked up. Mara's voice softened. You can be composed and still need a break. That almost undid her. Not the emails, not the affair, not the video, but a simple sentence allowing her to be steady without pretending she was stone. Elise set the cup down. I need 5 minutes. She went into the hallway and stood by the window. Below, people crossed the street with umbrellas, each life moving under its own weather. For years, Elise had been praised for never needing. The praise had been another form of erasure. A woman who never needed anything could be asked for everything. She breathed until the sharpness passed. When she returned, Mara had organized the emails by theme. Financial concealment, marital misconduct, family coercion, witness intimidation. It looked less like a divorce file than a map of a small kingdom built on one woman's silence. Grant's attorneys tried 3 strategies. First, they value. Judge Pike answered with the preserved records showing the company had been endangered by undisclosed spending, not by its discovery. Second, they suggested that Elise's hidden wealth constituted deception within the marriage. Mara answered with the prenuptial agreement Grant had signed after refusing to read the asset appendix because, in his words at the time, legal drama kills romance. Third, they implied that the videos were private family moments taken out of context. Then Nora submitted a sworn statement, and Victor submitted emails, and the context became worse than the clip. By the end of the 3rd week, Grant stopped trying to win and began trying to survive. He asked for mediation. Elise agreed. The mediation took place in a neutral office with beige walls, bad coffee, and a long table designed to make enemies feel professional. Grant arrived with 2 attorneys and no wedding ring. Elise arrived with Mara and a single folder. He looked thinner. His charm had become strained around the edges. Without applause, he seemed almost ordinary. For the first hour, attorneys spoke. Asset division, confidentiality, non-disparagement, company separation, jewelry return, debt exposure, public statements. Grant stared at Elise whenever he thought she was not looking. Finally, he asked for a private conversation. Mara said, no. Elise said, 5 minutes, with you present. Grant's attorneys left. Mara stayed. Grant leaned forward, elbows on the table. Was any of it real to you? Elise almost laughed, but the sadness in him looked genuine enough to deserve a real answer. Yes, she said. That is why it costs so much. His eyes reddened. I loved you. You loved being forgiven. He looked down. I was under pressure. You were underwritten. His mouth tightened. You keep making it about money. You keep forgetting money was the method, not the injury. He looked up then, confused and angry. Then what was the injury? Elise sat back. For all his speeches about vision, Grant had never truly seen her. Even now, he looked for the category that would save him. Hurt pride, jealousy, money, reputation, anything smaller than what he had done. The injury, she said, was that you knew I loved you enough to help, and you turned that love into infrastructure. Then you mocked me for becoming load-bearing. Mara glanced down, but Elise saw her expression shift. Grant's face emptied. For 1 second, he understood. Then he reached for the old escape. I can change. Elise nodded once. You should. Hope sparked in his eyes. For yourself, she added. For whoever has to deal with you next. Not for me. The spark died. He signed the settlement 2 hours later. The terms were clean. Elise retained all premarital assets, the house and her family interests. Grant surrendered claims connected to Sterling Vale. He repaid a portion of misused funds through equity forfeiture and personal assets. Bianca faced separate civil claims for returned property and compensation received under false pretenses. Vivienne and Camille lost all informal support. No one went to prison. That disappointed the internet. Elise did not care. Prison was not the measure. Freedom. The world loved the scandal for 9 days. Then it found another man, another mistress, another fall from a shinier platform. For Elise, the aftermath lasted longer, because quiet had to be rebuilt room by room. She changed the locks, then the art, then the bedroom. The first week, she slept in the guest room because the master bedroom smelled too much movers to take Grant's remaining suits to a storage facility. The third week, she stood in the closet, where Bianca had stolen the jewelry, and removed every dress Grant had ever criticized. The red one stayed. So did the gold one. So did the white silk blouse he once said looked too confident for a board dinner. Elise wore that blouse to the first official board meeting after Grant's resignation. Mercer Dynamics was renamed Meridian Signal within 60 days. Judge Pike became interim chair. Victor stayed after cooperating fully, but under strict oversight and with a new finance committee. Priya Coleman, a calm operations executive from Chicago, became CEO. On her first day, Priya reviewed the budget and said, "This company was not poor. It was vain." Elise decided she liked her. The employees adjusted faster than the executives. Paychecks cleared. Vendor calls slowed. Product timelines became honest. No one missed Grant's midnight motivational emails, except the people who had mistaken chaos for leadership. One afternoon, Elise visited the office quietly. A receptionist who had once looked through her as Grant's wife stood so quickly her chair rolled backward. "Miss Sterling," she said. Elise smiled. "Elise is fine." The woman looked relieved and embarrassed. On the way out, Elise passed the old founder wall. Grant's portrait had been removed. In its place was a simple framed statement about governance, transparency, and accountability. It was not poetic. It was better than poetic. It was enforceable. That evening, Nora came for dinner. They cooked pasta badly, opened a bottle of wine, and talked about ordinary things first. Classes, weather, Nora's new internship. Then Nora asked whether Elise hated all of them. Elise thought before answering. "Hate keeps people in the room," she said. "I prefer distance." Nora nodded slowly. "Aunt Vivienne says you destroyed the family." Vivienne believed the family was a system where everyone orbited Grant. It was. Then I destroyed an orbit. Nora smiled faintly. After dinner, Nora helped wash dishes. The sight of a Mercer doing a task without being asked would have made Elise laugh 6 months earlier. Now, it simply felt like evidence that people could learn when they wanted to. Camille did not learn. She sent messages every few weeks, each one a small performance of injury. The girls missed their aunt. I hope the money was worth losing family. Mom had to sell the Cape house. Hope you are proud. Elise did not answer until Camille crossed the line by sending a photograph of her daughters holding a sign that said, "We miss you, Aunt Elise." Then Elise replied through Mara, "Do not use children to reopen financial access. Future contact must be direct, respectful, and unrelated to payments." Camille went silent. Vivienne tried society first. She told friends Elise had been unstable, jealous, vengeful. That story survived until someone leaked another clip from Aurelia House, this time with Vivienne's laugh clearly audible after Bianca called Elise invisible. Invitations slowed. Charity boards became busy. Women who had smiled at Vivienne for years began choosing tables across the room. Grant attempted a comeback podcast. It was titled Building Through Betrayal. The first episode lasted 23 minutes and featured Grant speaking about cancel culture, private pain, and the danger of powerful women rewriting narratives. Within an hour, someone posted the original video beneath it. The podcast disappeared by morning. Elise learned this from Nora, who sent the link with a message. "I know you are above this, but I am not." It was satisfying. Elise laughed for the first time in days. She was not above satisfaction. She was simply learning not to. After 6 months after the launch, Elise returned to Aurelia House. The private dining room had been repainted. The gold menus were gone. The table where Grant had toasted Bianca now held linen cards for a different event, the first annual Sterling Vale Independence Dinner. No press attended. No executives performed. The guests were 12 women and 1 man, each referred by legal aid clinics, financial counselors, or domestic violence advocates. Some had left marriages where money was used as a leash. Some had built businesses under husbands' names because banks took men more seriously. Some had supported entire families while being called selfish for wanting receipts. Elise had created the Sterling Door Fund to provide legal retainers, emergency housing, credit repair, and financial planning for people escaping coercive relationships. She funded it privately and staffed it with professionals who understood that abuse did not always arrive with bruises. Sometimes it arrived as a joke at dinner. Sometimes it arrived as everyone telling one woman she should be grateful for being consumed. Before dinner, Mara walked the room with her, checking place cards. "You realize," Mara said, "this is a very expensive way to process divorce." Elise smiled. "Cheaper than staying married." Mara laughed. Nora arrived early to help. She wore a black dress and carried flowers. "Is this weird for you?" she asked, glancing toward the table. "Yes," Elise said, "in the right way." The evening was simple. No one told their full story unless they wanted to. No one was asked to prove pain. Dinner moved slowly. The room held laughter that did not require a victim. Near dessert, a woman named Tessa stood. She was in her 40s, with tired eyes and a voice that shook only at first. "My husband used to call me expensive," she said. "I had not bought clothes in 3 years, but he said the groceries, the kids, the dentist, the electricity, all of that was me being expensive. When I left, I thought I had nothing, because everything was in his name. Your fund paid for the lawyer, who found out half the business was mine." She looked at Elise. "I do not know what happened to make you start this, and I do not need to know. I just wanted to say that when someone opens a door, sometimes the person walking through it has been standing there for years." Elise could not answer immediately. The room blurred, not from weakness, but from the strange relief of seeing money become what she had once wanted love to be: practical, protective, and freely given. She stood later, not at the head of the table, but beside it. "I spent a long time believing that being useful would make me loved," she said. "That if I solved enough problems, paid enough bills, stayed calm enough, and asked for little enough, the people around me would eventually see me. They did see me. That was the hardest part to accept. They saw exactly how much they could take and still expect me to smile." Several faces in the room changed. Recognition was quiet, but it traveled quickly. Elise continued. "The lesson I learned is not that generosity is foolish. I refuse to let cruel people define one of the best things in me. The lesson is that generosity without boundaries becomes a place where selfish people build houses. Mara looked down at her plate. Nora wiped her eyes. If you are rebuilding tonight, Elise said, I hope you remember this. You are not cruel for closing an account that only withdraws from you. You are not selfish for asking where the money went, where the years went, where your name went. You are not a failure because someone needed you small to feel tall. She paused. Outside the tall windows, Boston glowed in the dark. And when someone calls you pathetic for surviving quietly, let them. Their mistake is thinking quiet means empty. Sometimes quiet is where the evidence is kept. The applause was not loud at first. It began with Tessa, then Nora, then the others. Elise accepted it with both hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. This room, too, had once held laughter at her expense. Now it held something better. Not victory. Victor 12. The first month after freedom did not feel like freedom every day. Some mornings Elise woke before dawn with her hand reaching toward a side of the bed that was no longer occupied. Some afternoons she heard a man's laugh in a restaurant and felt her body prepare for embarrassment before her mind remembered there was no one beside her who had permission to make her small. Healing, she discovered, was not a straight hallway. It was a house where some rooms still startled you. Mara told her this was normal. Nora told her she was allowed to be sad without wanting Grant back. Priya, who had been divorced twice and regretted neither marriage nor ending, told her, do not confuse missing a rhythm with missing the person who kept stepping on your feet. That sentence stayed with Elise. She began building new rhythms deliberately. Monday mornings were for the fund. Tuesday evenings were for walking by the harbor. No phone calls, no emergency transfers, no messages beginning with, do you have a minute? Wednesdays, she met Nora for dinner, if Nora was free. Thursdays, she reviewed investments with Andrew. Fridays, she left open, because an open evening felt like a luxury Grant had never understood. The first Friday she spent alone, she nearly filled it with work. Her hands reached for folders, automatically. Then she stopped, made soup, and watched rain move across the water until darkness settled over the windows. Nothing happened. No one needed rescuing. No one punished her for not being useful. It felt strange. Then it felt holy. The scandal still followed her in small ways. A woman in a gallery whispered when Elise passed. A banker sent an overly warm invitation to lunch, pretending not to want access to Sterling Vale. A magazine asked for an exclusive portrait of resilience, which Elise declined because she had no desire to be styled beside a window and turned into a lesson for people who liked pain polished. But one invitation made her pause. It came from the private school Camille's daughters attended. The headmistress wrote carefully, explaining that the school was creating a seminar on financial literacy, digital dignity, and family pressure. She knew the circumstances were sensitive, but she wondered whether Elise would speak to the senior girls about boundaries and money. Elise stared at the email for a long time. Camille's daughters were not responsible for their mother. They were also not props. Elise would not stand in front of them to perform sainthood or revenge. Still, she remembered being 17, already trained to be useful, already praised for being mature when maturity meant making adults comfortable. She accepted on one condition. No press, no parents, no mention of Grant. The auditorium was small, warm, and filled with girls in navy blazers trying to look bored and listening anyway. Elise stood without slides. She spoke about accounts, credit, signatures, passwords, inheritance, contracts, and the danger of letting anyone turn confusion into romance. Then she spoke about shame. If someone asks you to keep a secret that protects their comfort and damages your future, she said, pause. Love does not require you to become legally or financially blind. In the third row, Camille's oldest daughter, Sophie, looked down at her hands. After the talk, Sophie approached while the other girls clustered around the refreshments. My mom says you hate us, she said. Elise felt the old ache, the one attached to children used as shields. I do not hate you. Then why did everything change? Elise knelt slightly so she was closer to Sophie's eye level. Because adults made choices that were not honest. I decided I could not keep paying for dishonest choices. Sophie considered this. Is Uncle Grant bad? Elise chose carefully. Your uncle did harmful things and did not take responsibility until he had to. You are allowed to love someone and still know they hurt people. Sophie's eyes filled, but she nodded. Before leaving, she hugged Elise quickly, almost angrily, as if affection embarrassed her. Elise held her for 2 seconds and let go first. That night, Camille sent no message. Perhaps Sophie had not told her. Perhaps Camille had learned, for once, that using her daughters against Elise would only teach them where the truth was hidden. Elise drove home under a violet evening sky, thinking about inheritance. Money was one kind. Silence was another. Fear, entitlement, apology, courage. Families passed all of them down unless someone interrupted the chain. Grant had inherited Vivienne's hunger for admiration and her terror of being ordinary. Camille had inherited her talent for helplessness. Nora had nearly inherited the habit of laughing along to survive. Elise wondered what she had inherited besides money. Her grandmother's patience. Her mother's refusal to explain herself twice. Her father's belief that wealth was only clean when it created exits for people who had none. At a red light, Elise looked at her hands on the steering wheel. They were steady, not because nothing hurt, because hurt no longer drove. In person. It happened at a charity auction 9 months after the launch, the kind of event where old money pretended not to look at new scandal while bidding aggressively on vacation homes. Elise attended for the hospital wing Sterling Vale had funded. She wore dark blue satin, emerald earrings, and no wedding ring. She arrived with Mara, who claimed to dislike charity auctions but knew the exact market value of every donated painting in the room. Grant appeared near the end of the cocktail hour. Elise saw the ripple before she saw him. Heads turning. Voices lowering. A small clearing forming near the bar. He wore a black suit that fit beautifully, because vanity had survived what reputation had not. His hair was shorter. His face leaner. He looked humbled from a distance, which Elise knew was not the same as being humble. Mara noticed him and sighed. Do you want to leave? No. Do you want me to enjoy myself? Not yet. Grant crossed the room slowly, giving people time to watch. Of course he did. Even apology, for Grant, required an audience. Elise, he said. Grant. Mara stood beside her, expression pleasant enough to frighten experienced men. Grant nodded to Mara, then returned his attention to Elise. May I have 1 minute? You may have it here. His jaw tightened. He had wanted a corner, a balcony, somewhere he could lower his voice and perform intimacy. Instead, Elise gave him chandelier light and witnesses. I heard about the fund, he said. Sterling door. It is good work. Yes. He looked wounded by the absence of gratitude. I am trying to say, I am glad something meaningful came out of all this. All this, Mara repeated softly, as if testing the phrase for rot. Grant ignored her. I have been in therapy. Elise believed him. Grant loved expert attention. Therapy would give him language before it gave him accountability. I hope it helps, she said. He leaned closer. I know I hurt you. I know the video was unforgivable. But I also know we became trapped in roles. You hid things from me too, Elise. Your name, your money, your power. Maybe if you had trusted me with the truth, I would not have felt so small. There it was. Polished, therapized, and still rotten at the center. Mara's eyes sharpened. Elise lifted one hand slightly. Wait. She looked at Grant for a long moment. Do you know the difference between privacy and deception? She asked. He frowned. Privacy protects the self, Elise said. Deception exploits another person. I did not use my hidden wealth to drain you, mock you, replace you, or make you doubt your value. You used my hidden support to build a throne and invite another woman to sit on it. A woman nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Grant flushed. I came to apologize. No, you came to renegotiate blame. His eyes hardened, the old Grant breaking through the new vocabulary. You always have to win now. Elise smiled faintly. No, I only had to lose for so long that fairness looks aggressive to you. Mara made a small sound that might have been approval or a cough. Grant looked around and realized the room had gone quiet enough to hear the auction staff setting down glasses. He lowered his voice. People are watching. Elise felt the old line open in memory. People will be watching. Behave. Smile. Do not embarrass me. Do not make this difficult. Do not make my cruelty visible. This time, she almost felt grateful for the phrase. Yes, she said. They are. Grant stepped back. Nothing more was needed. He had come hoping to be seen as a man seeking peace. He left looking like a man still asking the woman he harmed to carry part of the blame. Mara watched him disappear toward the exit. That, she said, was less satisfying than prison, but more elegant. Elise laughed. During the auction, the hospital wing raised twice its target. Elise bid on nothing. She donated quietly through the foundation and left before dessert. Outside, the air smelled like rain and city stone. Cameras flashed near the curb for someone else. Elise stood under the awning and felt no urge to turn back. A year earlier, Grant's attention had been weather. Warmth when he approved, storm when he did not, fog when he wanted her uncertain. Now he was simply a man walking away in an expensive suit. The difference was not that he had become smaller. The difference was that Elise had stopped standing beneath him. Elise closed was not financial. It was emotional, and therefore less tidy. On the first anniversary of the launch, Meridian Signal held its annual meeting in the same ballroom where Grant had fallen. Priya wanted a different venue, worried it might feel haunted. Elise chose to return. Some rooms should see better behavior, she said. The ballroom looked different in daylight. No champagne towers, no dramatic lighting, no mistress glowing beside a podium. Rows of chairs faced a modest stage. Employees filled the room with laptops, coffee, and cautious optimism. The company had survived the audit, paid its vendors, released a delayed but honest product, and grown without turning crisis into mythology. Priya spoke first. She did not use the word vision once. She talked about timelines, customer retention, governance, employee promotions, and the discipline of telling the truth early enough to fix things. The applause she received was not dazzled. It was relieved. Then Elise stepped up for a brief investor statement. For a second, as she touched the podium, memory overlaid itself on the room. Grant's hand gripping the same wood. Bianca at the side. Vivianne's face. The video on the screen. Her own voice saying the lie is dying tonight. The memory did not vanish. It simply took its proper size. Elise looked at the employees. A year ago, this room held a public correction, she said. Today, it holds a company meeting. That may sound less exciting. It is also how healthy institutions are supposed to feel. Less spectacle, more responsibility. A few people smiled. I want to thank the employees who stayed through uncertainty, the vendors who worked with us while we cleaned the books, and the board members who chose accountability over comfort. Stability is not glamorous, but it is generous. It lets people plan their lives. She paused. Many of you were affected by decisions you did not make. That matters to me. The fund did not intervene here to preserve a name. Names are easy to polish and easier to ruin. We intervened to preserve work that could be made honest. In the front row, Victor looked down. Priya nodded once. Elise finished simply. May this next year be quieter because it is cleaner. The applause came warm and steady. Afterward, an employee from customer support approached her. He was young, nervous, holding a paper cup with both hands. I just wanted to say, he began, then stopped. When payroll was late that year, my wife was pregnant. We were terrified. I thought no one up top cared. Elise felt the sentence settle in her chest. I am sorry, she said. You deserved better. He nodded quickly. We got it now. That is all I wanted to say. As he walked away, Elise understood another truth. Grant had not only humiliated her, he had endangered people he never saw because they could not help him feel important. Her money had hidden the damage for too long. Her silence had protected workers in the short term, but it had also protected the man creating the danger. That was the hardest lesson, and she did not soften it for herself. Kindness without accountability can become a curtain. Behind it, harm learns to continue. That evening, Elise went back to Aurelia House alone. The manager offered the private dining room, but she chose a small table near the window. She ordered soup, bread, and a glass of white wine. Ordinary food. No performance. Halfway through dinner, an older woman at the next table leaned over. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Elise Sterling?" Elise set down her spoon. "Yes." The woman smiled nervously. "My daughter received help from your fund. She and my grandson are safe now. I promised myself if I ever saw you, I would say thank you, and then leave you in peace." Elise's throat tightened. "I am glad they are safe." The woman nodded, eyes wet, and turned back to her table, exactly as promised. Elise looked out at the streetlights beyond the glass. For years, she had paid bills that led back to Grant. Now she paid bills that led away from men like him. The money was the same currency, but the meaning had changed completely. When dessert came, the manager sent it with a note. "On the house. From the staff who remember." Elise smiled, then asked for it to be added to her bill anyway with a 50% tip. Some habits remained. She still liked clean accounts, but when she stepped out into the night, she was not balancing anyone else's lie. She was carrying only her coat, her keys, and a life that finally belonged to her. The city moved around her, indifferent and alive. Elise walked home slowly, not because she had nowhere to go, but because for the first time in years, she was not rushing to rescue a world that after 15, a year after the video, Elise received a letter. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address, forwarded through Mara's office because Grant no longer knew where Elise lived. She had sold the old house, not because she had to, but because freedom sometimes required refusing to maintain museums of pain. Her new home stood on a quiet street near the water, smaller, brighter, with a kitchen that caught morning sun, and a study lined with shelves she filled herself. Nothing in it had been chosen to impress Grant. Nothing in it waited for him. The letter was from Bianca. Elise almost threw it away. Then she opened it, because curiosity was not forgiveness, and she no longer confused the two. The handwriting was neat, slanted, careful. Bianca wrote that she had settled the civil claim, returned what she could, and left Boston. She wrote that Grant had lied to her, but that lying did not absolve her of choosing not to look too closely. She wrote that she had enjoyed feeling chosen over Elise because she had been foolish enough to think another woman's humiliation could become her security. Near the end, she wrote one sentence. Elise read twice. "I thought I was taking your place, but I was only auditioning for the role of the next woman he would use." Elise folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She did not respond. Some apologies did not require an answer. Some were not bridges. They were receipts. Grant's life became smaller, though not ruined in the dramatic way strangers online demanded. He consulted for a mid-sized firm in Denver, under supervision strict enough to bruise his ego. He dated briefly, visibly, unsuccessfully. He sent one final email through attorneys on the anniversary of their wedding. "I hope one day you remember that we were not always this." Elise did remember. That was the point. They had not always been this. They had once been young, hopeful, and soft with each other. There had been real mornings, real laughter, real comfort. But a beautiful beginning did not cancel an ugly ending. A good memory was not a life sentence. She replied with one line through Mara. "I remember enough to know what I am leaving behind." After that, Grant stopped writing. The Sterling Door Fund grew. Meridian Signal stabilized. Nora graduated and came to work for a nonprofit that taught financial literacy to young women leaving foster care. Victor became less nervous and more honest. Priya took the company into its first profitable year. Maura occasionally sent Elise legal articles with subject lines like "men who should have read contracts," which Elise saved in a folder marked Humor. Vivienne sold the Cape House, then the townhouse, then moved into a smaller apartment near Camille. She told anyone who asked that she had chosen simplicity. Elise heard this from Nora and wished her no harm. That, too, was freedom. One rainy night, almost exactly like the night the video arrived, Elise sat in her new kitchen, with tea cooling beside her and the old phone in her hand. She had kept the original videos, stored for legal reasons, buried in an encrypted archive. She opened the folder one last time. Grant raised his glass. Bianca laughed. Vivienne smiled. The old words came through the speaker. Pathetic failure. Elise watched herself not appear in the room. That was the strangest part. The whole cruelty had been built around a woman who was absent. They needed her missing so they could feel brave. She paused the clip on Grant's smile. For a long time, she had thought the opposite of humiliation was revenge. It was not. The opposite of humiliation was self-possession. Revenge still cared whether they watched. Self-possession did not. She deleted the local copy, leaving only the legal archive with Mara. Then she closed the laptop and looked around the kitchen. Rain on the glass. Warm light. A calendar filled with meetings she had chosen. A life no longer arranged around preventing someone else's discomfort. Her phone buzzed. A message from Tessa, one of the first women helped by the fund. Court signed today. The business is mine. I cried in the parking lot. Thank you for opening the door. Elise smiled. Then she wrote back. You walked through it. That part was yours. She set the phone down and let the quiet settle. It was not the old quiet, the kind made of swallowed words and unpaid emotional debts. This quiet had shape. It had windows. It had no one laughing in another room while she paid for the lights. A year ago, Grant had said women like Elise did not leave. He had been wrong about many things. That was the one she cherished most. Because women like Elise did leave. They left with the deed, the records, the truth, and the part of themselves no one had managed to spend. And sometimes, when they were finally free, they stopped being the woman behind someone else's rise and became the reason other women rose too. A quiet strength, hidden truth, and the moment a woman finally stops paying for her own humiliation.